Hi, my name is Michael,
And I'm Layla.
and we're here with our second episode of our podcast that we're still working on a name for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were just saying we don't give the name any thought until we have a list of names to choose from. And we probably said this last time, but we haven't decided and we don't think about it until these calls. So
Yeah. We should lean into that and say to keep our spontaneous style, we try not to think about the podcast. We make it sound like a decision
yeah,
until we're doing it. Yeah.
it kind of is though, because like with the topics, we're just like, oh, we have these ideas out, but I
Yeah.
haven't looked at this until just now. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
speaking of topics, we've got one for today, and it's finances, which is what brought the two of us together. So
hmm
this is going to be a good one, I think.
Yeah. And it's very relevant because of what happened yesterday
Oh
for
yeah.
you, which is
I
cool.
feel yeah, should we say it or let it be
It's
a
up to you.
but we'll get into that later. First. No, we got to say it. I've been in a bankruptcy and it was final yesterday. Um I'm
Exciting.
so excited. And it's weird to be speaking so openly and like positively about bankruptcy because for my whole life I heard about it as like the worst thing that could happen to your finances. But
Yeah.
for me, so far, it's looking like the best thing. Well, I
Yes.
think I think budgeting and like becoming aware of my money is what was the best thing. And that's what
hmm
showed me that the next logical step would be to go ahead and file bankruptcy because honey, you're in deep.
Yeah, yeah. No, for you, I think ultimately it did make sense. And now it's kind of starting with a fresh plate, which is I'm very eager to see how that looks. That's going to be super exciting. And plus Dave Ramsey filed bankruptcy, I think twice in his life. And he's like
Yeah.
super, so
And it's interesting. Like, should we go right into that topic right now or should we give backstory? Like, I guess
I
this is what
guess
we're talking
so.
about.
Yeah, I know that when we were planning this, we wanted to kind of talk about the difference between you growing up with around finances or not around finances and how different it was compared to me when I was in my early 20s, because I was even just thinking about this the other day, how lost I would be back in the day if there's no podcast, there's no YouTube, there was radio, and I'm sure like you probably didn't like probably nobody listened to that. Nobody wants to listen to somebody talking, at least back in I know when I was early 20s, like a radio wasn't something I would listen to like that. But yeah, it's just interesting how much it's opened up because of the internet.
Yeah, it's really big. It's funny when you say that, it makes me think of when I was a kid talking to
hmm
my mom about what it was like when she was young
Yeah.
and I could never get my head around the fact that she didn't have a TV. I was like, "You didn't have a
hmm
TV? Why didn't you get one?" She's
That's
like,
so funny.
"We didn't have them. They didn't exist." So it just reminds me of that like, I don't know, that feeling of like how different our experiences are
hmm
at different ages and we don't even really think about it as much.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think
Yeah.
we should. I know that I kind of want to focus on your side of it. Like what was it like? So if you're 55 now, so back
Hmm.
in I guess if you think of like the 90s,
Yeah.
what was it like then with your finances and like the your
Yeah.
personal finances and the experience too?
Well, we could go back even further because I think I got my
Okay.
first checking account
Yeah,
probably in
yeah.
like 1985
Okay.
or maybe 1986 because I was buying my first car. Yeah. So I opened a, and my first check was for that car. And I was like, maybe $1,500,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a little less than that. I can't even
Oh,
remember.
wow. The
Yeah.
car, the car was $1,500?
Yeah. So I had
Okay.
saved up money. I worked in a movie theater. I saved up money and then my dad gave me some money. And yeah, but the interesting thing I wanted to mention is just about my experience. And I mentioned this to my sister that day. She just lives near me. We like go walk in the park.
Mm.
I I asked her because she's always been good with money. I think partly she's my younger sister. I think partly because she saw me like screwing up from like out of the gate, and she was
Yeah.
like, "Okay, I'm not doing that."
Aw.
But I was bouncing checks in high school. Like
Okay.
from the gate, I was like, "Well, I have this checkbook and I want this thing, so let me just write this. I'll figure it out." Like that's
hmm
been my technique. But then overall, like I don't know, the things I think about that are different in the 80s and 90s were you couldn't, if you wanted to know how much was in your bank account, you had to go to the bank, or you could call, like, I can't remember. I think for as long as I had a bank account, you could call and like there'd be an automated voice thing that you could like punch in and it would tell you your balance.
Yeah.
Um, but you couldn't just like randomly look on your phone and check it and all these things that I totally take for granted now too.
Yeah.
And I think it's part of what kind of built my bad money habits because
Yeah.
I wasn't gonna like keep a record. Like when I think about this, like it's ridiculous. People would take. I think they still like a checkbook still comes with a little register, and you're
Hmm.
supposed to write down the check, the amount, and then subtract it from how much you can keep track of your balance. I think I would try that every now and then and be like, get a few days behind and be like, oh well, I guess I'm pretty sure there's money in here.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it wasn't as easy to like keep track for someone like me. I mean, honestly, I'm sure a lot of people are like, well, it's pretty easy. You just write down as you're writing the check, you know.
Yeah.
But it wasn't
I
easy for
remember
me.
the checkbooks like that. I got my own checkbooks when I was a teenager too, when I first opened mine. But I do remember, I don't know if it was my mom or my dad, but them filling out like
Yeah.
that thing. Not that they're good with finances, but I remember that like checks were a very common thing, and that's something that's like I don't ever write checks these days. It's very rare. So,
Yeah, I don't either. I got really mad I guess it was a couple years ago when I was getting my passport renewed. And I don't know if it's still like this, but they only accept payment by check. So I was
mm,
like, I have to order some checks so I could write a check to go get my
hmm.
passport. And I still only I don't have that bank account anymore, but I got a whole order of checks. And the only check I wrote was for that stupid
Yeah.
passport.
I think I had to because I renewed my passport too. I have checks though from when I was 16 and I use those.
Yeah.
They have like my old address on them and I just like cross it out.
Yeah.
So I still have a whole like book of all these checks with I think they have like little sea animals on them, the background of
Oh, yeah.
it
Nice.
from Bank of America. So I have some to fall back on, but it's very rare
Yeah.
for me to use them.
I just thought of another thing that I saw this makes me feel ancient and also very wise. The I remember my first ATM card because that wasn't a thing until
Hmm.
probably I was like in my early 20s, maybe in my 20s. I remember like getting an ATM card and being able to like go to an ATM machine like, oh, I can just take money out from here. Like I don't have to go to the bank. I can
Hmm.
just go to this machine that
Yeah,
I remember using it for the first time. That feels so old.
that's funny.
But yeah.
And did you have to go through the drive-throughs and still talk to somebody to get money, or did they have the machines like on the side of the
Um
building like they do now?
they before that they didn't. Like you had to go inside or you could do the drive through.
Yeah.
But I would often just go to find out what my balance was, go through the drive
Okay.
through and have to wait in that whole line and they would send a little printout of what my
Mm,
balance was.
that's
Um
crazy.
yeah.
That's
And
very
there'd be
strange.
long like they don't really have bank drive throughs in New York. So
Hmm.
I can't compare it now, but are there still like long lines at drive through lines like there used to be?
No, sometimes at the ATM, if like somebody gives me cash, which annoys me when I get cash because I don't use that ever, it's like a couple people will pull behind me or there'll be like one or two people in front of me.
Yeah.
But no, and I don't think there's no more, maybe there is. I can't say this for sure, but do they still have the people where you talk to them? I don't think so. Like I think it's all
I,
self-service.
I don't even know. I think they
I don't
must.
know.
They must have like a teller or two.
Yeah, they probably do. If for certain bigger things, if you want to be
Yeah.
like you don't want to go inside the bank, but you need to talk to somebody. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. With the when you had to call before the ATMs, were you calling from like your landline and
Oh
getting your
yeah.
balance? Okay.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah. And then because of the way I did my finances, I had to sort of like call from my landline, find out there how much money was in there, and
Hmm.
then try to go make the purchase before some other random check I forgot about hit.
Mm.
But yeah, so it wasn't as immediate, of course.
Yeah, so what would happen if if a check bounced, what you just can't pay for, like you already get the thing, right? Like let's say you pay for
Oh
something, but
yeah.
you get the thing, right? So how does what would happen if you a check bounced? I honestly don't know.
Uh, oh, I love it. So I have a lot of experience with this, so I can tell you all the different possibilities because I did it a lot. Like you
Hmm.
would get like they would often the bank would try to send the check through a second time, causing a
Okay.
second overdraft fee or return
Mm.
check fee, and then it would go back to the vendor, like whoever you wrote the check to, and then they had to figure it out. They had to
Mm.
so I had like it they could like press charges. They could like turn it over to the DA, I guess, or whoever would do that, and then they would pursue collecting on it. So I never
Hmm.
really had. I mean, there was one check that I had that was like one of the last ones I remember for like $300,
Hmm.
and it. I think I did it before I got sober. I can't remember, but I remember trying to like as part of my like recovery, like okay, I have to go fix all this stuff. Like I had this check out, you know, somewhere and the business had actually closed, but I knew it was
Oh.
still out there and there was a warrant for my arrest for it.
Oh
So I
wow.
remember like calling and trying to find out like all these different precincts. Like I know I have a hot check. Do they even use that language anymore? Like a hot check.
Never heard of that actually.
I wrote a hot check. Um, and yeah, so you could get arrested for it. And I did. I actually got arrested for that check.
Mm.
Um, because and the cop actually didn't take me to jail, but he did like it's kind of a funny-ish story. Um, but he did say like, okay, like I know where you work. And he believed my story that I was like, I really tried. I listed all these places. I was trying to figure out how to cover this. And I
Mhm.
have the money at home because I was saving it for school.
Wow.
Anyway, yeah, I have a lot,
How
lot of
old were you
stories like
then
that.
when you got arrested for that?
Um, I was probably in my 20s,
Okay. Do you have
maybe older than
pictures?
that.
Do you
Of
have
me at that
pictures?
age,
Yeah.
yeah, I must. I think I have one at the restaurant that I worked at. That the guy, I remember the cop, he was like, he said, all right, well, you better go take care of this tomorrow, because if not, I'm gonna go get a chef salad at Boulevard Bistro, like listed the place I worked. And I was
That's
like,
so
oh, I
funny.
promise I'll go do it. Yeah.
That's
But
great.
so that's what would happen. And then some places, it's funny, like they would put checks, like hot checks that people wrote, they would put them up in their
Hmm.
business to try to humiliate the people. Like, yeah, these are the
Wow.
people that haven't paid us. These are the checks they wrote.
I see.
Um, yeah.
Interesting. Were there a lot?
You'd only see like a couple of them. And like
Okay.
not many businesses would do that. I think like I remember there was like a tire store that I went to that did that. But it makes
Yeah.
it sound like the Wild West in a way, doesn't it?
Right. And it's also just really weird. I remember thinking that it was delayed. Like you don't get your money right away, you know? And it's
Oh
just
yeah.
very it could be just whenever you end up cashing the check. So it's just very crazy how it was. Yeah, everything was
Yeah.
just very slow motion, I would say, for our
And
money.
that was like that was where I would get in trouble because I worked as a waiter.
Hmm.
So I would get cash every day. So I was like, oh yeah, I'll just figure this out later.
Hmm.
But I would also like it was a thing before ATMs, especially to go and just write a check to cash, and you could go to like a grocery store courtesy booth, and they would
Hmm.
cash your check for you. So
Okay.
I would do that all the time, knowing there was no money in my bank account. But like, oh, like it'll take a couple days to get to the bank so I can make a deposit before then. But
Yeah. Wow. So when you were a waiter, do you remember what you were making money wise, like income wise?
I would never have known like what my annual income was at that
Hmm.
time. Uh, I just would never kept track of that. But I would
Yeah.
make it varied so much. My last job was at a pretty nice place. So sometimes I would make like 100, $200 a night. But
Well, that's
then there'd be
good.
nights that you make like 20, $30
Hmm.
if it was slow.
Yeah. I was a
Um,
server in high school and into college, and it was the same amount, which is kind of crazy to think about, like to just
oh
make,
yeah.
you know, the time difference. And my paychecks were, or my hourly rate was 225 per hour.
Uh-huh.
So, and yeah, I worked at IHOP
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, so for years and sometimes it would be slow, sometimes it'd be busy. Same amount. It's kind of that
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah. Well, it was a nice place that I
Yeah,
worked at with like high ticket prices.
that
So
makes
I think
sense.
that's why I made as much as I did back
Right.
then.
That's funny. Okay. So then what else with back then? I guess credit cards was the big other big thing too, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like it was probably I think I got my first credit card in like 1994, 1995.
Hmm.
And it was a Capital One card. I wish I could remember what the name of it was because I've tried to look before. But that was
Mm.
wild too because you would have to pay by sending them a check. That's how you paid your credit card bill.
Wow.
So, but it was the same thing. You could call the number and see how much, credit limit you had
Hmm.
and what the balance was. But then
Yeah.
you had to like write a check and mail it, and you had to make sure you mailed it in time for it to get there before the due date. And it was just like any other bill in that way back
Yeah.
then.
Well, that's different too, because even bills you had to pay through the mail with a check, right?
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Or
I've never done that.
yeah. And I was often late on my bills as
Uh,
like, so you could also go like, this was in Houston. I'm sure this was a lot of places. You could probably still do it now. I don't know. You could go to like a courtesy booth at a grocery store and pay your gas bill or your electric bill,
mm,
all that kind of stuff. So often I was
okay.
like, oh, they're going to turn my lights off. I got to go pay this right now. And I would
Yeah.
have to call the number and tell them I just paid it in such and such location. Please don't turn off my lights, blah, blah, blah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, my experience is different, of course, because I've been a lifetime person with financial organization challenges. So,
Hmm.
um, but yeah, it's interesting.
But that's harder then. Like I'm pretty good at being organized with like I still have a paper planner and that sort of thing. So I'm sure it would have been kind of similar to now, but I can't imagine like I check my bank accounts very frequently. Like I'll just log in the
Hmm.
morning. Like that's kind of my routine. Not all of them, but like my main checking account and that's right on my phone. Like 2 seconds I'm logged in and I
Yeah,
can make any payments that I need to. Like that's I can't imagine having to yeah, it's just such a weird time. Very
yeah,
weird.
yeah. It's what like today when I think about that. This morning I just made a credit card payment,
Uh-huh.
and the money was immediately available on like
Hmm.
like you look on the website on Capital One when you make the payment, it shows you your credit limit or
Yeah.
your available credit just immediately bloop, shows that little
Yep.
cute green animation.
Hmm.
Um, it's thinking about how hard it used to be to just make a payment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Even this morning, today's the 15th, so I got paid from payroll and I have money going to separate accounts, but I always transfer it
yeah.
immediately. And it's through one of them goes to Chase, that like $250 goes to Chase, and I just immediately go in, transfer that to Bank of America. It happens like instantly within a few minutes, basically. So it's already in my Bank of America account within
Oh wow,
it's
it
crazy.
goes
And
that
there's no
fast.
extra fees. Yeah, it goes that fast. With Chase specifically, not all my accounts do that, but
Oh,
yeah,
that's
I'm
good
like,
to
oh,
know.
it's already there. It's still like processing, but I can see it, which in the past it's with most
Oh,
banks
I see.
it takes like a couple days to like, even see it. So
Yeah,
it's crazy.
yeah. When I
Very
transfer my
convenient.
money from my Novo business account to my Capital
Hmm.
One personal account, typically it'll show up the next day if I do it early enough in the morning.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not immediate.
Yeah. Yeah. Today I did that too the other day, and that takes like a day or two. But
Yeah.
still better than mailing a check and
Oh yeah.
stressing that it's on the way, that it makes it, especially these days with all the, I mean, it's all been adapted to work with technology, but I feel like the mail
Yeah.
system is still pretty organized, but there's just a lot more that's being shipped these days. So,
Yeah. It's interesting. I think a lot of my challenges had to do with the fact that like those tasks, like paying a bill with my ADHD, and I
hmm.
always want to put this disclaimer, like I'm not trying to use this as an excuse. It's just an observation that like it's challenging for me to be like, okay, now I have to pay this bill. That means write the check. Okay, do you have
Yeah.
an envelope? Okay, good. I have an envelope. Got it. What about stamps? no stamp. Okay, so that means now I have to do this other task and go to the bank or go to the
Mm-hmm.
post office to get stamps because it was the early days, the Wild West. That's
Mm-hmm.
what you had to do. So a lot of times you'd be like, oh, I have to remember to go get stamps so I can mail this
Yeah.
bill. And then I wouldn't get the stamps. You know what I mean? Like, and then
Mm-hmm.
on top of like, so this is so much easier for me too, that you can set up like things to auto pay and all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you just have that one credit card for some time, or did you end up opening more in your 20s?
I had just that credit card and it was only
Okay.
$300 and I maxed it out.
Okay.
And I think it went into, it must, I don't even know what happened to that card. I'm sure it got closed and it was only $300. So they didn't pursue collections on it for,
Wow.
or I just, oh, that was before cell phones too. So they probably,
Right.
my phone was probably ringing all day long when I wasn't there with bill
Yeah,
collectors. Yeah. But that card must have been charged off. And then
that's
I
funny.
didn't try again until later, probably 90, late 90s. I started getting credit cards again. And same thing happened. I tried to get an IKEA card
Hmm.
thinking like, they're never going to give me a card. And they did. I was like, oh boy, $1,000. What am I going to buy with this $1,000 I have now?
Yeah.
Which isn't exactly how you're supposed to think about credit cards.
Yeah.
And then I think I got another card then, maxed them out, stopped paying them, and they just sort of went away eventually
So
because
you
I wasn't paying
never,
attention.
they never got the money back? Like that, those are just went somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
And that
what's
was,
so funny.
you couldn't really, like, that was right around when I started getting on the internet more
Yeah.
often, but you can really check your credit score. I didn't know how to, or even that it was important to.
Hmm.
So, yeah, that's just another wave of credit card. I
Hmm.
think the good thing was that I like pretty much like blew up my credit really fast. So I didn't get into huge amounts of debt back then. I
Yeah.
just like got credit cards, maxed them out, and then was like,
Forgot
oh
about
well, I
it.
guess yeah,
Yeah. Got it.
yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Hmm. And did you have a pager? Just out of
I did have
curiosity.
a pager for a while. I was a manager at that restaurant I mentioned for a
Uh-huh.
while, and they wanted me to get a pager.
Okay. So could companies, these credit card companies find you through that? Or was it
I
more
don't
so?
know. I don't remember them ever like paging me.
Yeah, okay. I remember pager.
Yeah,
I remember my dad having a pager and it
it
was
seems so
like,
high
oh,
tech
gotta make a
too.
call.
Oh,
So
I
funny.
hate talking on the phone so much, and I just couldn't hate. I couldn't avoid it back then because
Hmm.
people weren't texting and emailing all that stuff.
True.
But if I had like something that said I had to call them right now, I'd be like, oh no, why do you want me to call you?
Hmm. Would it's
Yeah,
I don't remember, does it say like call? Does it send a message as well? Or does it just say like name and like you know that they want you to call?
I
You
feel
remember?
like it would just be the number, and you had to just recognize the number, maybe.
Okay.
But there was a way, like there was a time that I knew you could like send number messages to people. Like the manager or the owner of that restaurant, her girlfriend used to send her messages that said 143, meaning I love
Oh
you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But I can't remember exactly how that worked.
Yeah. No,
Maybe
I
she
wouldn't
sent
know.
that instead of the number. I don't know.
I guess in relation to that, with the internet being such a big thing now, and I could, when I was learning about finances, I could listen to podcasts, I could read blog posts, all of that stuff. How was that different back in the day? Like, how did you learn about finances? Were you getting any sort of education on that?
Um, Not really. Like, I mean, I think that was, I mean, one of my challenges because it didn't come easy to me.
Hmm.
And Dave Ramsey, it's interesting because I think we had different experiences because Dave Ramsey, I think his like Money Makeover was the first like financial book I bought. And I
Mm.
had the internet, of course. This was probably two, 2009, 2010, something
Okay.
like that. But I don't know why. Maybe YouTube wasn't as much of a thing because ultimately YouTube is where I started really learning and seeing people. It was seeing other people try to fix their finances and how
Yeah.
they were doing it and showing their spreadsheets and like what choices they were making. Dave Ramsey for me just made me feel more discouraged. Like I would reading that book, he would be talking about people who were in, I think maybe we said this in the last episode too,
Hmm.
people who were really in a bad situation, but they had houses and stuff.
Right.
And I was like,
Can't relate.
oh,
Yeah.
like if that's a bad situation, then like, why would I even bother to try to fix this? Like,
Hmm.
I took it to the other extreme. I was like, well, I guess I just keep doing what I've been doing.
Yeah.
Um, but there's this one YouTuber who I don't even watch anymore. I feel like I said this before, Carter Sullivan,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
like she like watch something about watching her treat her YouTube career as a career and a business made me like, oh, I'm running a business. And
Hmm.
that was like the first thing that kind of sparked something for me of like, oh, I need to stop acting like I just am scraggling money together somehow. Like I'm actually running a business. And if I start running it like that and learn how
Hmm.
to do my money, it'll be different. So that it was YouTube. YouTube knows all.
Yeah. No, seriously. And it's all free, which is cool. So that's
Yeah.
how I started too. I don't remember exactly who I started with, but I know that I would watch anybody who would be talking about like their debt-free story, like how much they paid off, or if they were like sharing a debt confession or something and how like just planning out how to pay it down. I was all on
Hmm.
that. Like that was motivating. And same with articles. There was on NerdWallet. I looked up this recently and I think it's still going, but they would post these like debt-free stories of people, like couples or individuals paying down debt. And I would be at work, I remember, and I would go to that website and check if there were new articles because I was like, this is so motivating. I need, because it's hard when you're going through your debt-free journey. Like
Yeah.
it's not fun. So yeah, I would always need like constant motivation. And that was either YouTube or articles and then I started getting into podcasts and the financial independence movement. So yeah, YouTube's great. It's the best thing ever.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
hope
it's
it doesn't
terrible
go
in its own
anywhere.
ways too, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I don't, that's been my main source of like learning because there's so many different people talking about the same thing. You can
Hmm.
find the exact thing that you need.
Yeah. I know that my dad, um, and this might have been more recent too, but he would listen on the radio to like Clark Howard. He's always like, you need to listen to
Mm.
Clark Howard. That was more recent. I'm like, Dad, like I don't need to listen to Clark Howard, but he loves Clark Howard, and I think
Yeah,
that's through radio. But I honestly I've never listened to him.
I think he has a YouTube channel. If it's who I
Okay.
think it
I
is,
don't
I
think my
can't remember
dad watches
why,
YouTube.
but maybe he does both.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
some if it's who I'm thinking of, I don't remember why, but I watched him for a minute. I was like, okay, I can't watch this guy. Something
yeah,
about
yeah.
him.
No, he's definitely not my style either. Like I prefer, I guess, how I do things, like my approach and just people similar to that. So
Yeah,
no, Dave Ramsey, I understand though. Like he's very shame-based and um he's not like he's not a financial coach, like he's just do it my way and that's the only way. So
yeah.
yeah. But it
Some
was
of
motivating.
his take on bankruptcy, I don't like. Like,
Mm,
because I've heard him talk about it. I'll still watch his videos every now and then, partly because I just want to be mad at somebody. But
hmm.
he says he'll talk about like, oh, it's so stressful to go through bankruptcy. No, you don't want to do this, blah blah. And it was, but it was stressful because of my debt situation. It wasn't
Hmm.
stressful because of bankruptcy. Like it had its own challenges, but it was the first sense of relief I had. It was like, oh, there's a solution to this. So
Yeah,
that's one of the things that I wish he didn't do that because there may be some people watching his show that really should just file bankruptcy, but he
right.
really demonizes it, makes it sound like this horrible thing. And it's not
Yeah.
as in my situation, and I think my situation is also different because I didn't have any major assets to deal with or to
Hmm.
worry about losing.
Right.
Um, so that's probably part of why he talks about it being stressful.
Yeah.
Um, and with an experience I don't have.
Yeah, I could imagine that it would be if you had stuff that you could potentially have to turn in. And yeah,
Hmm.
that would be a whole different ball game. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people struggled back in the day. I
Yeah.
comment down below what you did because there's a lot of people who watch my channel, I'm sure your channel too, that are 50s, 60s. So I would love to hear
Yeah.
about how you handle finances back in the day.
Yeah. I'd love to hear if I'm remembering things wrong too. I'm sure there are some things that people are going to be like, it wasn't like that. What are you talking about?
No, I think you're right. So that sounds right.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What about your first, you mentioned your first bank account.
Yeah, that was when I was 16, I believe, because I had started working. I was working, my first job was Little Caesars. I was the shaker boarder, actually, like where you stand outside and shake the stupid board to get
Oh,
attention. My friend helped me get the job, and that was my first job. I might have opened the bank account before that, so it might have been 15. And that was what, 16 years ago at Bank of America. I remember going with my sister because she already had a bank account open and she like I think she drove me there because I probably couldn't drive at the time. Yeah, and I remember getting the checks. I remember having to set up like my user ID and the password. We did have internet, of course, at that time. So, because
uh,
that was probably what, like 2008, 2000, I think it was 2008 or so, 2007. But we did have to go to the bank to set that all up and get things going. I remember you could choose like the card design. I got like a panda bear
uh-huh.
because it donated to the World Wildlife Fund or something like that. I think that no, they now it's just a boring red one, but I had that for a while. Like they kept sending a little panda bear on the front.
Yeah.
But I still have the bank account. I did write a few checks and but there's been times where I was also struggling, like at the beginning of my financial journey, getting after I graduated grad school was when things were tough for me, like in 2017. And I overdrafted my account a few times. There was one time I couldn't get it back into the positive, and I kept that receipt for some time. And I don't know where I put it because I was like, this will make a good story one day. And I was right, but I don't
Yeah.
have it anymore. But I remember I was working at that time at front desk at an urgent care and
Hmm.
making like 12 something an hour. But I had just come out of a period where I like was working part-time, barely making anything. So my account was negative. And I had some cash, like maybe $7. And that I remember going the morning before work to the ATM, like just desperately putting in this $7 to try to get it positive, but it was still negative, and like
Oh,
how awful it felt. And it was just like a stress the whole day. Yeah, so
oh,
but it was easier to manage those
yeah.
things at the time for sure, but even easier
I,
now.
yeah. I always forget that you had like financial issues too. Like, because I've
Mhm.
only known you as, I guess, maybe a couple of years ago, I started watching your YouTube channel. So to me, I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, yeah. I mean, I just imagine you as always having been on
No,
top of things with your finances.
no, I would get paid and spend it. Like I would buy gym clothes, I would buy makeup or beauty products. I didn't save anything from when I was like high school, college, none of that I kept, unfortunately. Yeah, I would literally just get paid and then there would be I really liked, I've always been into the gym. But at the
Mhm.
time the brand Gymshark, which is still a very big brand, I
Yeah.
was super into that. Like one of their first customers, like I loved Gymshark. And so anytime they had a drop, like any new launch or whatever, I was buying new stuff, and it was pretty expensive. And it was pretty frequent too. Like every few
Hmm.
weeks they would have a new launch, and I'm like, oh, I have to buy it. And I would just blow my whole paycheck on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Did you
then
do
credit
that
card debt.
thing? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, with credit cards.
Did you do that thing where you're going to get paid in a couple days and you start planning how you're going to spend it all? Like,
Um,
not like planning, writing down, but just in my head, I'd be constantly like, oh, and then I'm going to do this. And oh, I can't wait till I have money again.
yeah. Honestly, I don't think I did. I was just charging to my credit card. Like I didn't care. I'm like,
Uh,
I'll just pay it like as I go. I don't know what I was thinking. I just didn't think about it. I don't
that like
I felt guilty, but I don't know what I was thinking.
That's the thing. Like people ask, like when I did my video about my tax debt, I didn't know. Like I don't know how it happened. Like,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
with credit cards, there's no explanation. It's sort of like it's not a logical thought process for me. Like, was that what it was like for you with your credit cards? You were like, well, there's available credit, and I want this thing, so let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It was just me. Like I knew it wasn't what I should be doing. I just didn't care, I guess, or I didn't
Yeah.
um yeah, my want for those things was more important to me. It's like I want those leggings, like which is so stupid
Yeah.
looking back now because yeah, I was like I needed to pay a lot of my debt also came from owing my sister money because we lived together and I
Hmm.
stopped paying her my portion of the house for months. And like luckily she's a nice sister and didn't like kick me out or disown me or anything, because I was still buying stuff, like buying these clothes, even though I owed her money. And
Hmm.
I could barely pay her anything. I was like giving her 100 per month when it should have been 700 plus for the house. So that's where a big chunk of my debt came from too. Like I had to pay her back. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was just very irresponsible with spending. I guess I was an addict of spending, I would say, but not like you can't stop type of thing. But I was just really enjoyed shopping. So I
Yeah.
don't know what I was thinking.
I mean, I was thinking just then about how it's similar to my experience with alcohol and drugs
Hmm.
in that way of like, you may have heard it before that, and I think it's used outside of AA too, that definition of insanity being doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
Yeah.
Um, and I think my spending was like that because in my mind, like I was really like, I really believed like I'm gonna work my finances out. Like I'm gonna get this figured out. But right
Hmm.
now, I'm gonna go buy an Apple Watch. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I really thought like on some level, like it wasn't as bad. And I was gonna be able to fix it.
Yeah. I
Um,
genuinely I don't know what I was thinking. Like I remember when I knew I had to make a change. That was more so in 2018 though. I was like, okay, I'm making more money. I started listening to podcast like Dave Ramsey was the big one for
mhm.
me and just getting motivated. I'm like, oh, I could not be stressed about money. Like, I was losing sleep a lot from the stress of finances. So I think I was like something needs to change. And then I knew I didn't want to keep being so broke because it doesn't feel good. So
Yeah.
yeah, but even when I took out my student loans, I remember like when I was 18, 17, 18, 19, I would just get the highest amount that I could get. And you have to go through a little course actually when you take out student loans of like how to pay them back and what this means. And I just skipped through it like, like, okay, I just know it's going to
Yeah.
be there. I didn't care. Like, okay, I'll pay it
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, especially when you're young, it's just like, yeah, 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 that's later. Like, I'll be a
Hmm.
grown up. I'll be grown up. I mean,
Yeah.
but I'll be making money then because I'm going to school right now. So I'll just pay it when I have money. So okay,
Yeah.
got it. I get it.
Yeah.
Next,
That's
yeah,
why I always say, like, I don't know that I would have listened if I learned about finances in school, because that they're pushing for that, it's a
yeah,
requirement in high school, which is great, but I don't know that I would have paid attention. I think really it comes from you have to start young. Like your parents have to be talking about it and make it a bigger thing in your life because I don't think I would have listened because I there were things that had I paid attention, I probably wouldn't have
yeah.
had so much debt.
I feel like we did. Like I remember, but I question my memories lately because I'll say
Yeah.
things like to my sister, and she'll be like, "That's not how
Oh
that happened,"
no.
or "That never happened," which
Uh-huh.
is worse.
Huh.
But we had like I remember when I was in high school, I was a senior. We had like those classes you have one semester it's this, next semester it's something else. And I remember
Yeah.
one of the semesters was like basically like it wasn't home economics, but it was sort of like basically a how to be a grown-up class.
Yeah.
And
I
and
took
they
that
talked
too.
about yeah,
Sorry, was it called like I mine when I took it was family consumer science.
it's
Was it
probably
that
something
too?
like that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
took it too.
And I remember learning how to like balance a checkbook.
Hmm.
That was the same period when I wasn't keeping up with my checkbook.
Yeah.
I don't, I think the thing that would have helped me was for an adult to be like, "Hey, you're really screwing this up, and you probably don't want to.
Yeah.
What's, how can I help you figure this out?" Like, and that maybe an adult said that to me. But when you're young, like kind of to your point,
Hmm.
you think everyone who's older is kind of just dumb. Like, well,
Yeah.
you don't understand my life. You don't know how hard. You don't know
Yeah.
what I need to get done.
Right. No, I don't know what would have helped. I think
Yeah,
just having that like rock bottom moment and feeling so crappy all the time, like just stressed all the time. It was also 2017 was a really bad year for me. I was in a long-term relationship. We were together for 5 years, and it was a really bad breakup. Like when I think back at that time, it was like a movie. Like I can't even believe that shit happened to me. But
mm,
um, I co-signed a car for him as well, which was very unfortunate. And it was at that point in 2017 that he stopped paying for the car. Like he kept missing payments. So my score, my credit score was dropping in the 500s. And I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't pay for it because I didn't have the money. Uh, he would like ignore me, and but it's in my name as well, you know? So it
yeah,
was so stressful. Yeah, that was just not a good year for me. And then once I started making more money, I'm like, I don't ever want to feel like that again.
yeah.
So, yeah,
Oh,
crazy.
I did that to my mom.
Oh,
Like,
really?
it's one of
It
my big regrets.
sucks.
I made a video of like where I sort of referred to it, and I was going to make a whole video about it because it was kind of, I think it was right before you and I started working together.
Hmm.
But when I was starting to look at my money and starting to realize like, oh my God, this has really affected a lot of other people.
Hmm.
I might start crying when I talk about this. But my mom co-signed on a car for me. I
Hmm.
was in my 30s. And I like just it wasn't like I intended to screw her over, but I really did. I stopped making
Yeah.
payments on the car, and they would be late, and then she would get phone calls and call me like, "What's
Yeah.
going on with this?" I didn't really understand that it was affecting her credit. And at one point, the car was almost paid off
Hmm.
already. I mean, there's probably like $1,000 something. She called me. She's like, "Hey, I just paid off your car."
Ah,
Like, and it wasn't until, I mean, she passed away like 10 years ago, but it
yeah.
wasn't until just recently that I was like, oh my God, that was really not okay that I did
Yeah.
that. Yeah, but I'm sure she understood on some
Yeah.
level.
I
But
think it's one thing though when it's like at least you're her child, you know? It's just it
yeah,
was a really dumb decision for I would never even when I think of co-signing a house, like going into a house with Sebastian and we've been together for a long time. I wouldn't do it. I would have to be married. There needs to be like things in place, like prenup.
yeah,
It's very important to me now. I will never co-sign on there's like I'm fine with my sister. Yeah. So that's the only exception is like my sister I would be fine with because I fully trust her. But
yeah.
aside from
I
that,
think I think that's exactly my one exception I would make to that,
hmm,
to my sister.
yeah.
Partly because she's like covered my ass a lot,
Yeah,
but partly
yeah.
because I know I can trust her.
Hmm. No, it's interesting to hear like your side of doing that, somebody co-signing
Yeah,
for you, and then yeah, yeah, it was
yeah.
not a good time.
Just to be clear though, I wasn't saying that in any way to like let your ex off the hook or
Oh
like
yeah,
to
no.
like make him a sympathetic character, because I don't see myself as a sympathetic character in that situation either.
Yeah, no, fuck him. Like I will
Yeah.
still to my day, to this day, I as soon as the car was paid off, which I paid off, lost a few thousand because of that.
Hmm. And he kept
Uh
the car.
he filed bankruptcy and screwed me over because I took him to court and if he so once he started missing the payments, I took him to court, which was very expensive. I had to pay an attorney. And they made this agreement where he had to pay me and then I make the payment. And if that were to stop, then I can start garnishing his wages. So a
Mm.
year or two later, he stopped paying. So I started garnishing his wages and he filed bankruptcy. And and when you file bankruptcy, you can stop getting your wages garnished. And I was like, okay, so the car's mine now, right? And they're like, no. It was so messed up. Like my attorney
Uh,
didn't she was like, if he stops paying, then it's yours. That she told me the wrong thing. So yeah, it made it even more stressful, honestly. And then we had to go to a dealership together and like handle it that way, which was he's like a
you and the
toddler.
boyfriend?
Yes. Yeah. After like
Uh,
years of misery and it was so dramatic. Like I'm telling you, it's a whole different story. But eventually that took like a whole process. It took a couple of days of doing that. And then I ended up paying off the car. Oh, because we sold it to the car to Carfax. That's how it worked.
mm.
But he was upside down on the car, so I still had to pay like $3,000 or something, 2,500. Like, yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
God.
And then I stopped talking to him, like because I had to still keep being nice to him, so he would
Hmm.
play
Do
along, you
it.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh,
I
that
was like, it
sucks.
sucked so much. Like I didn't want to talk to him and I didn't want to be nice to him. But as soon as I paid off the car, it was like number blocked, never talking to you again. I never have. So yeah. And that was kind
That
of
really
off topic.
sucks.
I'm sorry, but that was
No, I
I
think
have a
it,
whole video on that. So
there's so many stories.
yeah, huge
Oh, that
mistake.
sucks.
It
Yeah.
did suck. Yeah.
I'm sorry that happened. That
Thank
really
you.
sucks.
It was
Yeah,
my
like
fault.
I mean, I feel like it's important to own responsibility and that kind of thing,
Hmm.
but it's not your fault he acted like that.
Right.
Like, I mean, like, sure, now you know, don't co-sign on
Yeah.
things, and but it's not your fault that he fucked you over. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. No. And he would like intentionally, he was very immature, like a sociopath. So he would like intentionally avoid it so that he could like prolong either talking to me or just to like make me upset. It was just a very bad cycle. And then it just kept getting pushed out. And I'm like, let's do this, you know? I don't want to be
yeah,
nice anymore. Yeah, it was hard,
oh,
very
that's
hard.
terrible. Oh yeah, and he put you in a position where you had to be nice to him,
Hmm.
or you, yeah, that's
Yeah.
terrible.
It was all fake. I'm like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
like just pretending to be nice. So, what you talked about having or purchasing the car for 1,500, that's like a pretty big
Hmm.
major purchase. Anything else that you bought that was big, extravagant?
Never. Like the only other thing was like the car that I mentioned that my mom had to
Yeah,
finish the
yeah.
payments on. Like that, I think that was probably my biggest purchase because my finances have always been so kind of screwed up that I was never able to like get in a position to buy anything bigger than that.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I did buy a house with my sister. That's when I was still in grad school. It was 2013. So I was still just in college, in undergrad. 2013, that year I took out more student loans to be able to put a larger down payment on the house. What's crazy though is it was a townhome, but it was a pretty decent sized townhome and an end unit. It was $93,000. That's what we got it for in 2013. And now
Oh wow.
it's worth probably like close to 300K, which is just so upsetting. But I put down 3,500 on that house, which was pretty big for me at the time, but it was really from debt. My name was not on the house, which was fine. It was just me, my sister, like I agreed to pay my portion of it. So that was a pretty big purchase. And my car, I started leasing a car first
Hmm.
because I wouldn't have been able to afford monthly payments to finance a car or to like buy a car, I don't think. I remember going with my dad and negotiating. I got my Toyota Camry 2015, Toyota Camry Sport Edition, ruby red, and I loved it so much. And that was 200 a month, I think, to lease, which isn't bad. And then I ended up buying the same when you do a lease, have you ever leased?
No.
Because when you are at the end of it, it's actually more expensive, at least back when I was going through it. It was more expensive to buy out the lease than it was to buy the same car but a different one, you know? So I got a white Toyota Camry, same model, but it was already owned by somebody. So I bought that at the end of my lease. And that was a big
Hmm.
purchase. That was like $19,000. And that's when I
Wow.
reached my highest point of debt. And I was like, okay, I need to pay down debt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my biggest purchase.
And was that the time that you paid down debt? Like, was that
Us.
kind of the story that I know? Yeah.
Yeah, that's when I started. It was because I bought that car June 2018. That's when I had 82,000, more than that, 82,000 of debt. And I was like,
Mm,
okay, now I'm going to pay this off in 5 years or whatever goal it was that I set.
so good.
Yeah,
And you did it.
I did
Did you
it.
do it faster than that? I forgot.
I wanted to do 4 years. I did 5 years though. So
Yeah.
initially I thought it would take me like 10 years or something, but when I started listening to Dave Ramsey, I was like, oh, I could do this in 4 years, but it took 5 years, which is okay.
Yeah.
It happened. Yeah.
So good.
We'll have so much to talk about with finances. I think we'll continue a couple of episodes or a few episodes on the topic of finances. I guess anybody listening, if there's something specific that y'all would want us to talk about, let us know. So,
Oh yeah. I love people's questions because in
mhm.
a way, like especially because I'm willing to speak openly about bankruptcy, I
Yeah.
think it's I feel like I'm adding value to the conversation by not hiding that fact in a way, just
Hmm.
like letting people know what it is. So all that is to say, yes, please ask questions of us.
Yeah. No, I think it'll be good to hear your bankruptcy story even further because it's not even something I'm knowledgeable on like that. Like you were teaching me about a lot of this stuff, how the meetings work and the process. So I guess that's it for our first finance episode.
I think that was the best finance episode we've done yet.
Yeah, right? The best.
Yeah.
I am looking forward to talking more on money. It's interesting, of course, because we both are now in this space and
Yeah.
my one of my favorite topics. So we'll definitely talk about it more. But this was interesting. Glad to hear
Yeah.
how it was back in the 90s. When you were saying like you got your first credit card in 95, I was 2 years old. You said 94, so I was 1 years old
Yeah.
actually. Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's fun. Oh, and if you're watching, people that are
Oh yeah.
watching, click the like button, subscribe, I'll leave a comment. We've talked about that already.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess if you're on Spotify or wherever else, leave a review.
Oh, yeah.
Think y'all can do that. If you listen, you can then leave a review. So we would appreciate it. A positive review, preferably.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. All
All
right.
right. Thanks, y'all, for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.
Yay. Bye.
Yay!